Hello, welcome to the progressive rebirth of the Inequality Chronicles. My name is Daniel Crawford, and it is a pleasure to have you back. This will be taking 15 minutes, unlike how it used to be before. So, let's get this started. The subject of this week's edition of the Inequality Chronicles and its return is, what does it mean to be a progressive? See, a few weeks ago I launched the Facebook page for the Licking County Progressives. I've thought for quite some time that we needed to have some kind of organizing effort for those of us on the left, and especially for those of us on the left within Licking County, Ohio. Tonight, I want to bring back this old YouTube video series, if you want to call it that, a YouTube show, to try and help promote this effort. Now, you may be somewhat familiar with the Inequality Chronicles if you've watched in the past. If not, this is basically what I used to do. The old model was I would spend about, half an hour talking about various articles in the news for each episode. Each article addressed something that had to regard inequality and how we were all being affected by it. Each one had their own specific theme. But now, inequality, it's still an issue, but I see the progressives as being the only ones who are really wanting to address this, at least in a way that will actually succeed. So, being blunt about it, this is nakedly partisan. And a few years ago, the local Democratic Party, actually more specifically the club, came up with a document, what do we stand for? What makes us Democrats document? And that's all well and good. But we have to remember that not all progressives are Democrats. And not all Democrats are progressives. So, with that in mind, this is just a, sort of off the top of my head, 5 things that I believe, from what I can tell, makes one a progressive. So, start things off here. Number 1, the belief that healthcare is a right. Now, this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart because, my mother, in her struggle towards the end of her life, dealt with a lack of inadequate healthcare. Sure, she had Medicaid, but Medicaid is not very well funded, at least to cover all of your needs, especially in her condition. Even so, it is still better than having no health care, and millions of Americans still have no health care. Heck, there are still millions of people around the world in third world countries that don't have adequate health care. Of course, there are also some people in third world countries that actually have more adequate health care than us. Isn't that odd? So, this comes down to a basic argument of one's right to be alive. If you're truly someone who believes in a right to life, and I like to think of myself as someone who does believe that to a certain degree, then I don't see how you can get around the mindset that access to healthcare is one's right. It is not a privilege that should be bought in the marketplace. It is a right. And I strongly believe that if you see healthcare as being something that you have to purchase access to, that you have to be somewhat privileged in order to even have. If you see that there is any room for the market in providing health insurance, then I don't see how you can call yourself a progressive. Call it a purity test, I don't care. It's just the facts. If you see health insurance, well, health care rather, as something that should be profitable, then you're not a progressive. But if you see this as a right that should have no barriers to it whatsoever, at least the basic needs of healthcare provided by health coverage. If you see that, the rights aspect or view of healthcare, then you are a progressive, at least in this respect. Number 2, the belief that all are entitled to a living wage. All who are willing to work should be entitled to a living wage. This is a tricky argument because depending on your place in time and your location, a living wage can be any rate, any amount of hours, what have you. A living wage in one part of the world might not be a living wage in another part of the world. You might become wealthy working for what we Americans call a living wage in some other country in the world. But what I'm talking about is just the basic understanding of what a human needs in order to survive without assistance. A living wage guarantees that one is able to provide for themselves and their family. To have a living wage does not mean to have plenty of money to waste on things you don't need. That's not a living wage. That's not what we mean. What we mean is what you need to survive. And that's all we're arguing for. As a matter of fact, I guarantee that if you're watching this, you are familiar with the Fight for 15. That itself is technically not even a living wage. It's a compromise in and of itself. But it's definitely much better than what any of the mainstream politicians are arguing for. So yeah, if you are a progressive, you believe that every human being is entitled to some form of a living wage, wherein all they need to do is show up for work at least the same amount of hours that all others within that society are expected to work, and then be able to raise their family on that. At least work roughly 40 hours a week at the most to be able to provide for their family with just that. And if you need anything extra, or you want anything extra, rather, then you should work overtime to have play money, as some call it. That's at least one basic tenet here is the belief that all are entitled to a living wage. If you believe that it's okay to get by with crumbs, what we see as the substandard minimum wage. Right now in this country, it was what, $7.25 an hour, the federal minimum wage at this moment. If you think that's sufficient, you're not a progressive. If you think that anything less than what is considered to be a minimum wage is sufficient, is all that we really need to ensure, then yeah, that's my purity test there. You are not a progressive if you think that we're just fine, less than the basic minimum that we're requesting at $15 an hour. So yeah, that's something that would make you a progressive if you believe in a living wage. Number 3, the right to organize. If you are a progressive, you believe that it is an inalienable right of all workers to organize in the workplace, and that nothing should impede upon that right. Not only to organize, but something that is connected to it, collectively bargain for your conditions in the workplace. I do believe that. that we as workers, no matter where you are in the world, have a right to coordinate your efforts with your fellow co-workers, to combine your efforts and democratize, if you will, the workplace. Balance the playing field with those who are in management. More or less make them see things from your perspective before final decisions are made. This protects many things with respect to your working conditions, like your safety, your benefits, vacations, just time off, your breaks, all of this. We take for granted how many things we, especially as Americans, enjoy in the workplace, like having a weekend off. How many of these things we inherited because of the efforts of the working class in organizing together and creating trade unions? I've never personally been a part of a union because I've mostly worked in the service sector or as a temp or a janitor for a non-profit organization. There are a number of different things we should be thankful for unions and those who have organized in the past, but we must recognize that the right to organize is being assaulted. It is under attack by the oligarchy of this country and even of the entire planet. So if you are a progressive, you see the right to organize as something that is inviolable, that something that we cannot allow to be degraded over time. If you see compromise with the right to organize, then you are not a progressive. As a matter of fact, my personal litmus test on this for any politician is if you do not stand with those of us who want to make it easier for working people to organize as opposed to creating all these hurdles, if you are not standing with, for instance, the Employee Free Choice Act, something we've been advocating for years, then I do not believe you are a progressive. It's time to put power back in working people's hands. Stop dithering on this. So, I think it is time for all those who claim to stand up for working people to declare without any doubt they are supportive of at least the Employee Free Choice Act. If you don't know what that is, look it up. So, you have that. Number 4, a robust educational system. This can mean any number of things. I realize that. But I think down at its core, one has to believe that the educational system has to be strong. It has to work for everyone. It has to lift everyone up. It has to help our teachers do their jobs. And it has to help our students prepare themselves for the future. And this has to be something that is not only from kindergarten through 12th grade, but also beyond that. And you could probably even say it should include some kind of requirement to advocate for, public colleges and universities eventually becoming tuition free. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. In the short term, I think it should mean reducing interest rates and allowing people to refinance their loans and all that. So, but if you see that there's no problem with the private institutions, or they're not abusing themselves whatsoever, you cannot be a progressive whatsoever. Personally, I don't see any room for supporting, the standardized testing, as well as it is hurting our education, hurting our students, definitely hurting our teachers, and the rest of the world doesn't do it. So why are we? But that's number 4. Number 5, and finally, is believing that everyone should be able to retire with dignity. We have a race to the bottom type system going on here with our social safety net, specifically with Social Security and Medicare. So if one has to work until the day they die, and you support that, if you support any talk of reducing benefits for the elderly or making people work longer, work until they're 70 years old instead of talking about actually trying to pull back a little bit on how long they have to work, I don't think you could be a progressive. But you're a progressive if you believe that we should not only protect Social Security and our social safety net, but even work towards expanding it as a goal in the end. Eliminating the gap. Eliminating the tax for Social Security, which is capped at, I can't remember where it is, like $106,000 or something like that. But eliminating that cap and allowing 100% of everyone's income to be taxed on, not a tax of 100%, but 100% of one's income, instead of allowing the wealthy to pay their taxes on just like a fraction of a percent of their millions of dollars they bring in a year. If you believe in eliminating that cap and expanding the benefits, then you're a progressive. If you believe that that goes too far, and maybe we should consider raising the retirement age, attaching benefits to the chain CPI. If you think that those are workable compromises, you're not a progressive. So, with that, looks like my time is about up. Thank you for listening, and next week we will be bringing you another thing to talk about. So, thank you, and have a good night. Stay aggressive.